In a monastery high on a misty mountain lived a young, earnest monk named Koji. He was known for his sincerity, but also for his quiet impatience. He longed for enlightenment, a grand task to prove his devotion. One spring morning, the old Roshi, the monastery's abbot, summoned him. Koji's heart beat fast, imagining a great scholarly quest. The Roshi, his face peaceful, led Koji up the mountain path. They passed lush moss gardens and a serene bamboo grove. They climbed to the highest point, a wind-swept rocky plateau. The ground was almost all stone, cracked and barren. "This will be your garden," the Roshi said, his voice quiet but firm. "Your task is to make it bloom." Koji stared, his heart sinking. "But, Master," Koji began, "nothing can grow here." "The soil is poison. The wind is a knife. There is no water. That is the task," the Roshi replied. He turned and walked back down the path, leaving Koji alone. The other monks pitied him. "It is a fool's errand," one whispered. But Koji, though his heart was heavy, could not accept this. He had been given a task. He would see it through. For the first month, Koji did nothing but sit on the plateau. He watched the sun rise over the jagged rocks and set behind them. He felt the wind tear at his robes and the sharp stones beneath him. He was not just observing the barren land, he was learning it. He saw that before he could add anything, he must first take away. The land was choked with stones, from pebbles to boulders. So he began. His first task was clearing. He started at one corner. He picked up the first stone. He bowed to it, honoring its place, and then placed it in his basket. His days took on a new rhythm. Wake, meditate, fill the basket with stones. He carried it to the edge, emptied it, and returned. His hands, soft from copying sutras, cracked and bled. In the evenings, he would soak his raw hands and meditate on the pain. Slowly, his own impatience began to wear away. This work continued not for weeks, but for months, and then for a year. The pile of stones at the cliff's edge grew into a small hill. One afternoon, while trying to dislodge a large boulder, his lever stick snapped. He collapsed, spent, against the unfeeling rock. He thought he would have to return to the Roshi, a failure. And then he heard it. A faint, impossible sound. A gurgle. He scrambled up, his weariness forgotten, and dug with his hands. All night he worked, and as the dawn broke, he finally shifted the massive stone. There, beneath it, was a tiny, dark opening in the rock. And from it, a small, clear spring of water trickled out. It was not much, barely a cupful a minute, but it was life. Koji had cleared the stones and found water, but the ground that remained was thin, sandy, and poor. He knew what he had to do. He spent a week weaving 2 new, strong baskets from willow branches. Then, before dawn, he began his new pilgrimage. He walked down the winding mountain path, miles into the valley below. There, by the river, the earth was black, rich, and full of life. He filled his 2 baskets and began the long, arduous climb back up. Each step was a struggle. The path was steep, and the load was immense. He emptied the 2 baskets, spreading the dark, fragrant earth in a thin layer over the rock. Then he turned and went back down to do it again. He made 2 trips every single day. The monks saw him pass, his robes dark with sweat, his eyes focused. "He has moved a mountain of stone," one remarked. "Now he tries to carry a valley of earth." Koji heard them, but their words were like the wind. The journey itself became his meditation. Left foot, right foot. Breathe in, breathe out. He was no longer just building a garden, he was building himself. Years passed, and his garden now had a foot of rich, dark, borrowed earth. The day finally came. Koji knelt on the soft earth he had carried. He cupped the water from his tiny spring and let it fall onto the soil. He planted hardy mountain grasses and resilient mosses, and in the very center, he planted a single, hopeful plum sapling. He tended them with the devotion a mother gives a newborn. And for a week, it seemed to work. Tiny green shoots of grass appeared. Then the autumn storms came. Koji climbed a path one morning, after a night of ferocious gales, his heart tight with fear. His work was annihilated. The wind had torn the tender grasses out by their roots. The plum sapling was snapped, its small branches broken. Koji fell to his knees. He had fought the stone and the path, but how could he fight the wind? He sat for 3 days, unmoving, as the wind howled around him. He saw how it spared nothing, except the very stones he had first cursed. He observed the twisted pines on the lower slopes. They did not fight the wind, they understood it. He knew what he had to do. Koji walked to the edge of the plateau, to the hill of stones he had created years before. He had thought his work with them was finished, but they were the answer. He began to build. He lifted the heavy stones and began to lay a low, thick, circular wall around his plot. It was a puzzle of balance, fitting each stone to the next, finding its natural place. This was work born of patience. A stone would slip, and he would have to restart. This task took another 2 years. Finally, the wall was complete. It was not high, only to his chest, but it was thick, strong, and circular. It was designed not to stop the wind, but to break its force and create calm within. Inside his new sanctuary of stone, Koji began again. He made the long walk to the valley and brought back more soil. He planted again grasses, mosses, and hardy mountain herbs. And in the center, he planted a new plum sapling. He held his breath as the seasons turned. The wind tore at the outside of the wall, but inside, the air was almost still. One morning in late spring, after a long winter, Koji climbed the path. He had learned that hope was not a rushing river, but a deep, quiet well. He stepped inside the circle of stone. The grasses were thick and green, the herbs were fragrant. And in the center, the plum sapling, a bare stick all winter, had burst into life. At the end of its delicate branches were 5 perfect pale pink blossoms. Koji did not cheer. He simply sat on the dark earth. He watched a bee that had found the flower. A single tear traced a path through the dust on his cheek. Many years passed. Koji was no longer a young monk. He never achieved the sudden thunderclap of enlightenment he had once craved. But his garden was a miracle. The stone wall was covered in moss and flowering vines. And in the center, the plum tree was no longer a sapling. Every spring, it exploded in a cloud of fragrant blossoms. Monks from all over came to see the garden that bloomed at the top of the world. One day, the old Roshi, now ancient and frail, made the long climb. He came and sat with Koji in the garden. Finally, the Roshi gestured to the garden. You were given an impossible task. The mountain did not change, the Roshi observed. The wind did not stop. No, master, Koji replied, a small smile on his face. But the stone found its true place as a shield. The soil found its home, and the seed, in its own time, found its moment to bloom. The Roshi nodded, a deep, peaceful light in his eyes. You have been a hard-working student, Koji, the Roshi said. You built enlightenment, one stone, one basket of earth, one blossom at a time. You did not just make a garden bloom, you became the bloom. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.